I begin by offering myself at the divine lotus feet of my Guru, God, and best friend Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Um, Welcome to part 2 for the blueprint of an effective bhajan session. And as Uncle mentioned last month, we talked about the various technical aspects of how to put together an effective bhajan session from an individual standpoint, from an organizer standpoint, and as well as the standpoint of the entire congregation as a whole. And today we're going to be discussing a bit more on these technical aspects of how we bring all these different aspects together through the enhancement of our sound systems at our Sai centers. Just to start us off, to kind of draw from what we discussed last week, at the end of the day, everything we do with Sai Bhajans, the main point of it is to enhance, to increase, and to develop the bhava or the feeling inside us. So one note, I attended a bhajan session yesterday, and one thing that came to my mind that I wanted to share with all of you today was, it is very important that, yes, we say that the lead singer in a bhajan session has to portray that bhava through their singing. But it's not only that the lead singer or even the chorus singers, it is even the instrumentalists' responsibility to communicate that bhava or the feeling and the meaning of a particular bhajan through their style of playing. For example, we have the bhajan, He Vishwanath, He Gaurinath, He Sainath Bhagavan. It's a beautifully composed, very Hindustani classical style bhajan. And typically for most slow bhajans, when we get to the last line, as a tabla player myself, at the end of the last line in the first speed, generally we like to play a double speed rela. So when the last line of the bhajan is Daya Karo, Kripa Karo, but then the tabla player, and I'm guilty of this myself, will start playing a very fast tak dinak dinak tak dinak dinak tak dinak in a double speed matra. But if we think about it, what are we actually singing at that time? We're saying, Daya karo, kripa karo, have mercy on us, have compassion on us, protect us, dear Lord. So at that time, it is advisable for the tabla player to still continue to play a softer, simpler beat. So just one little suggestion that came to my mind yesterday during bhajans that I wanted to share with all of you before getting into the technical aspects, so that we tie this session to what we had discussed few weeks back. So let's get into the basics of a Sai Bhajan sound system. Doing sound for Sai Bhajans is very unique for the main fact that the audience and the listeners are on the same side. Generally, for any kind of concert or any other kind of program where a sound system would be implemented, the performers are on the stage. They have their own sound setup with their monitors, and the congregation or the audience would have their own sound mix. But with Sai Bhajans, we have a very unique situation where we are all facing one direction. We are technically all the performers. We are all offering the bhajan to Swami, and Swami is the one sole audience member. So how we set up sound systems for Sai Bhajans, right, is very different from how a church or a Gurudwara would have their sound system set up. A Gurudwara, typically the Kirtan singers, they'll all be seated on a platform facing the congregation. Or in a church also, the band will be placed on a platform facing the congregation. But in Sai Bhajans is one unique aspect. And while that is very unique, it poses certain challenges and constraints that we have to work with. So over the next 1 hour, I hope to provide some ideas and suggestions on how we can perfectly enhance our Sai Center's Sai Bhajan sound systems. So the first question arises, is a sound system really needed, right? The Prashanti Mandir, as we know it, was inaugurated by Swami in 1950. Before that, the Patha Mandiram was inaugurated in 1947. And Swami has been singing bhajan since the age of 8 when he started the Pandari Bhajan group with his friends in the village of Puttaparthi. And I'm sure in those very early days, there was no sound system. Swami did not go around Puttaparthi village with a megaphone singing Jaya Panduranga Prabhu Vithala. It was the pure power of his voice and of those of his playmates that resounded throughout the village of Puttaparthi. So if we go back to those roots, do we really need a sound system? The answer lies in that the size of the congregation, right? Of course, if it's just a few members, 4 or 5 people coming together and singing, one simple microphone connected to a speaker might be sufficient. But when we are getting into singers and members in the numbers of 20, 30, 40, 50 and onwards, right? A sound system is definitely needed. And on that note, quality is always better than quantity. Sometimes we feel that, in order to have more number of mics or more speakers, or to save on costs, right? We feel that, okay, let's buy something that's a bit more cost effective, something that's a bit more cheaper. But it is, in my humble suggestion, right, in my honest opinion, it's better to wait for some time, save up those funds as a group, and then purchase a sound system, sound equipment that will last the center for a much longer time. It's a long-term investment at the end of the day. On that note, it's very important to also, when we're buying sound systems, right? I'll get into some of these microphones in particulars later on in the discussion. And by the way, please at any time feel free to pose your questions in the chat box. I have the chat box open in front of me here. So please do feel free to mention your questions in the chat box at any time, and feel free to interrupt. We'll make this a very interactive session today, and we'll try to keep it a bit lighthearted as well. So as I was mentioning, right, it's very important to have high quality sound systems. At the end of the day, we want to offer the best we can to Swami, and generally the higher the quality of the equipment, the longer it will last. But it's also important to take care of the equipment, right? I've been in situations at my own center where every 1 or 2 years we've had to replace our full set of cables because they were not being maintained properly. And we'll get into cable management later as well. When it comes to buying sound equipment, it's also very important to be careful of counterfeits. Popular brands such as Shure. I've been actually victim to this myself. Last year I wanted to purchase some new microphones, Shure SM58s, 58 beta microphones, and I saw a really good deal on eBay. Generally the microphone goes for around $175 on Amazon or Guitar Center, and I saw it on eBay for $35, and I bought it. Turns out when the microphones arrived, they were actually counterfeits, and they still work, but there was a hissing sound, a lot of electric static was coming in those microphones, so that was $70 down the drain. So it's very important when we're buying microphones or any kind of sound equipment that we're being very careful of counterfeit products that we may receive. So the main thing, the end user of any sound system, right, is the person holding the microphone. That is the end user of the equipment that we have in our Sai centers. Not everyone is going to be holding the speakers, not everybody is going to be plugging in the cables, but everyone who is singing a bhajan at the end of the day is going to be holding the microphone. And many times what happens is that we'll get complaints from the other side of the aisle saying, Sairam, the volume is too soft, please raise the volume, please raise the volume. I'll start getting dozens of text messages saying, oh, Sairam, volume, vocal volume, lead volume, not loud enough, please increase, please increase. And then when I turn my head to the side just to take a peek at what's going on, I would see the lead singer holding the mic like this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second here. I would see them holding the mic like this. One time, I was attending a house bhajan, and I actually saw someone holding a microphone like this. And I asked them, why are you holding the mic like this? They said, because there's better sound pickup like this. So I feel it is better to hold the mic like this. And I'm able to rest my arm on my head. And I was just, my friend and I were there. We were just flabbergasted. How is this a better pickup than holding the mic properly in front of your mouth? And so, as I was showing on the slide, the correct way to hold a microphone is to be perpendicular to one's mouth. So I'm going to turn to the side and show. Should be held like this. Maybe a little bit of an angle is fine, but generally when we get these complaints, oh, the lead singer's volume is not loud enough, or chorus volume is not loud enough, they'll generally hold it like this. And that is completely against the pattern of how the sound is picked up in the microphone. And actually, it's the issue doesn't even come with the lead singers. Generally, the biggest complaint that I have received when I've been doing sound for bhajans is that the chorus is not being heard loud enough. Because generally, chorus singers, we become a bit, we lose our consciousness because we become so engrossed in following the bhajan. At least the lead singer is a little bit more aware, and they're making sure to hold their mic. But many times we'll get complaints saying, oh, the chorus volume is not being heard loud enough. And the reason is because when they're singing, they'll slowly every 30 seconds a mic will move another 1 inch away until the mic is almost 1 mile away, and nothing is being picked up, right? So for everyone, not just the lead singer but even the chorus singer, it is important that the mic is held very close to the mouth, about 2 fingers length away, and it should be held perpendicular to the mouth like this in a straight line. And the reason for this is I will show you the anatomy of a microphone inside. This is a typical vocal microphone, and this is what it looks when you remove this head. This is what the mic looks like inside. And over inside is this capsule, and here you have a sound pickup field. Under this film are small magnets, small wires, and other electric components that vibrate in reaction to your sound. And though the access to all of those is right here in the front of the mic. So if you're holding the mic like this, all of your sound is just hitting this metal pole. It's not actually doing anything to the electric components that are in the front of the mic. That is why we always emphasize that it is very important to hold the mic this way. So that is on how we hold the microphone. Sometimes you will also see that we have puffs, the foam covers are placed on the microphones. That's a good practice. It doesn't generally impact the sound quality too much. Not at all, really. It's pretty negligible. But it especially if you want to increase the length of your microphone's life, it's good to shield the mic from any spit or anything. And it's also, form of hygiene care as well, right? Because when we're singing, naturally some spit is going to fly out of our mouths onto the microphone, and eventually with that buildup, that may enter inside the microphone and disturb the electric components there. So very important, if especially for akhanda bhajans or longer sessions, it's important to have the foam covers. Yeah. And it's important that the foam covers are also replaced often. Generally, I generally, if I use the foam covers for sound setup, I actually do replace them after every session. Generally, the foam covers are washing machine washable. You can just throw them in with your regular laundry, or if you have like a mesh bag for undergarments or something, you can pop in all of your foam covers in there and actually throw them in the laundry, and they'll be perfectly sanitized to be reused for the next session. And generally after longer bhajans like akhanda bhajan or something, we'll just throw them out. After 24 hours of being sang into, those covers are probably pretty contaminated, and may even be a good practice that during the span of the akhanda bhajan, that the foam covers are replaced every 4 to 6 hours. So that's about the microphone. Next is the stand, right? How should the microphone stand be used? Now, should mic stands be used at all? Well, for instruments, of course, we don't have a choice. We have to use a stand for harmonium, tabla. And if you're singing while you're playing an instrument, of course, there's no choice. A stand has to be used. But if possible, I understand it's difficult on a weekly basis for centers to provide stands for all the vocal microphones that they have in the center on a weekly basis for regular events. But it is generally advised, if possible, to have a stand actually for every mic, so that the mic is being positioned in the correct way. So the way to use mic stands, right? So this mic stand I have here is the same one being shown on the screen. This is the Samson MB1. It's a very common mic stand. So it has a few components here. So one, if you're a taller person, you can unscrew this bit of the stand. There's like a hold here. Then you can increase the height and then retighten it. And then there is a boom part of the mic stand. So you can extend this out to adjust to how you're singing, and then it has a further extension as well, right? So what I've noticed sometimes is this microphone clip is actually a very handy tool, right? That's where the mic actually goes. And what'll happen is somebody, if they're sitting like this, right? And let's say I'm playing harmonium, I've noticed sometimes, volunteers will come and put the mic like this. And then we have the same issue again, right? Where the sound is not going into the front of the microphone. So it's important that we face the mic to the mouth of the singer. We would we would unscrew the boom a bit so that it's a bit movable, close it, and then all you have to do is make sure that clip is tight, and then pivot the microphone 90 degrees so that it is now facing the singer. So it's important that the mic stand is positioned this way when anyone is singing into it. Now, how to wrap up the mic stand, especially important if we don't have a permanent facility for our Sai Center and we're transporting our system, day in and day out. Now, in the working position, this is what my mic stand looks like. And if I want to pack it away and transport it, sure, I can just shove this into my van's trunk. But then what happens is if this whole thing is extended out like this, over time, it will start to degrade faster. Many times when mic stands have been extended out like this, I've lost it's broken here at this point where it screws into this tripod base. So it's very important that we retract and make the mic stand as small as possible prior to transporting it, and that'll make it easier for folks to transport it as well. So we close it up, we bring down the main pipe, and then we bring this up, retract this into the mic stand as much as possible, and then this part as well. And then now your mic stand is ready to transport. I see some chats have come in. I have AirPod Max can be connected to Sai Center sound system. I will save one more mic of Sai Center someone else can use. We use mic stands to avoid this issue. So AirPod Max, actually, so AirPod is a wireless headphone, right, with the microphones. Those are connected over Bluetooth, and Bluetooth generally has a latency about 10 to 20 milliseconds. Actually, we don't notice it if we're listening to music on our phones or watching a movie, but in live sound, when you have instruments playing, there will be some latency, and I'm sure that the microphone pickup from the AirPods will gather a lot of feedback because that mic is not directional. This mic, we can get into so many technicalities around microphones, right? This is a directional microphone, so that when I'm singing or playing an instrument into the microphone, the sound is only being picked up from one direction, and that, while seems constricting, actually works to limit feedback, right? And that's something we want to avoid in our sound setups. So I would not advise using AirPod Max, but if you have it working in your center, I would be really, really curious to know how you guys make it work. The next very important thing in our Sai Center's sound system that I mentioned is the cables, right? The worst way to really wrap a cable is with the elbow. And many times volunteers are very, very enthusiastic. They'll come up and say, "Sairam, brother, can we help you wrap a cable?" And I say, "Sure, take." And they'll start doing this. And every time I see somebody doing this, my heart almost stops, because when you're wrapping a wire like this, you are forcing it to enter a certain shape. We have to treat the wire with a lot of love and respect, and actually see what happens when I'm unraveling the wire. After having done that, my wire is already doing something called supercoiling, right? So when I am going to now reopen that same cable, and it's going to do this, and that wire is going to get tangled, and it's going to have a lot of tension inside. And see, all of these wires, it's not just one wire inside, right? There's actually 3 or 4 generally wires inside this cable that make up this XLR cable, right? So any kind of fraying can happen if the cables are handled very roughly. So the way cables should be wrapped is the way your manufacturer actually wraps them before distributing them to the center. So the way the if you're buying a microphone cable off of Amazon or any other music store vendor, the way it'll be wrapped is using the under over method. So that method, it takes a little bit to get a hang of, but once you get the hang of it, it'll be so fast. So the way this is done is you kind of show the mic, the end of the cable, kind of like a flashlight, and you take about 12 to 18 inches of the cable down, you put your thumb up, and then you bring these two together, and that makes one loop. Now the next loop, instead of doing the same motion like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bring it around, and the end of the cable will come like this between these two. So the cable has come down like this. Then the next one, again, I'm going to do the normal wrap. It'll go over, and then again it'll go under the next time. Over, under. And if you're wrapping a generally, like, let's say a 25-foot cable, which is the length of this one, I would say think of like a roti, right? A roti or a paratha. That's how big the circle should generally be. If it's too big also, it might get tangled with other wires that are placed in your box. Speaking of tangling, it's always a great idea to put one of these Velcro ties at the end of every cable. I even do it to my phone and laptop chargers because there's an abyss of other equipment in my backpack. So having these, the way the Velcro ties work is you would have it permanently wrapped to one little end of the cable so that when you're unwrapping and using the cable, you don't have to remove it. You can use the wire with this tie being on so that you don't lose it. So generally, like I said about roti or paratha size loops, and once you get the hang of it, it can go really fast, this cable wrapping. So there's many YouTube tutorials available to show how to wrap cables properly. And at the end, basically once we have the cable wrapped, you would want to take this Velcro tie and put it around the cable, and that's it. This is how the cable should be stored. Many times I see cables stored up like this. Well, they'll be wrapped and then there'll be some super coiling going on, and then they will tie them, and that's generally not advisable. On getting another, is it okay to wrap cables on the plastic spools? It is okay so long as you're not pulling it too hard. Sometimes in excitement and in a rush because we have to clean up or set up really fast, we'll do it really, really fast. As long as it's done slow, it should be okay. Let's go to the next section. So we have the cable management. And another very important thing is when we go to Prashanti Nilayam, right, and we see the bhajan group seated in the front, the cabling is super, super clean. We won't see any wires going around the front of the hall. And so this is an example from our retreat that we just had, a Regional 2 retreat in Region 2. We had 31 microphones being plugged into the sound system. And this picture was taken just after setup. And you can see here, even with so many microphones on the men's and the women's side, the cabling is very clean. As you can see on the men's side over here, we have one stream of wires coming out, going to all of the mics and all of the other electronic paraphernalia on the floor here. So it's very important to maintain good cabling practice, and this will also help to limit tangling during a bhajan session, when you're passing the microphones around. And of course, one thing I like to always keep in mind is We have beautiful altars at our Sai centers, and the altar team puts in so much effort to make the aesthetic of the hall so beautiful. So from a sound team perspective as well, we should aid in that overall aesthetic by making sure that our cable management is clean as much as possible. One thing I wish to note, I forgot to include it on the slides here. Many times especially for larger events like retreats and things where people are moving around the hall, we'll tape the wires down to the floors. I would strongly advise not to use any kind of tape other than a very special tape that is available called gaffer's tape. Gaffer's tape can stick to a variety of different surfaces: wood, cement, tile, even carpet. And that tape will not leave any kind of residue on the wires. Or especially important if you're renting a venue and you're taping down on the carpet of a rented venue, you don't want to leave any residue on that carpet as well. So using gaffer's tape is very important if you need to tape down your wires for any particular event. There's a very important question here, right? We're just talking about all these cables. And the question is, do wireless mics make it easier? The answer to this is yes or no. Wireless mics have their place. For example, if it's a retreat and there's a workshop going on, of course, wireless mics would be awesome. But at the end of the day, no mic is truly wireless, because the way a wireless mic works is that you have a receiver, and the receiver has two outputs, and a wire has to be taken from those two outputs to plug into your mixer. So at the end of the day, no mic is technically truly wireless. Of course, moving around is a bit easier with wireless mics. But at the end of the day, if we think that, wireless mics are going to reduce our setup time, from experience, in fact, it increases the amount of time you spend to set up, because then you have to find a plug point for those receivers. You have to plug the receivers into the sound system. And like I said, for larger events, they're a great tool to have, but it's not a necessity. Wireless mics are also very expensive. There are cheaper wireless mics available on Amazon, and I have gone through the process of actually buying them and using them, and they're not at all reliable. To have a good, reliable wireless microphone, you're looking at upwards of at least $300 per microphone, which is generally pretty cost prohibitive. And also, I strongly believe that return on investment is not that high. So while they're a great tool, we should not always resort to wireless mics. They should be used with discretion in the right time and place where they are needed. Types of cables. The cable I've been showing you right now is called the XLR cable. This is the most widely used cable in any kind of sound system. It has 3 pins on each side. This is the male end. This is the female end. Female end typically plugs into your microphone, like so. Male end typically plugs into your mixer. Speaking of the mixer is what I like to call the headquarters of the entire Bhajan session. So this is where the magic truly happens. All of our microphones are plugged into the mixer, and the speakers are plugged out of the mixer. This is where all the balancing happens. Increase the volume, decrease the volume. But on the mixer, we find so many knobs, and we have so many different kinds of mixers actually. The mixer on top is a Soundcraft 42-channel mixer. Fun fact, this is the exact same mixer that is still used in Sai Kulwant Hall till date. The bottom one is a pretty generic analog mixer. We also have digital mixers. These are my personal favorite. I love to use these. The only problem is they're a little less plug and play. So the way these work is you connect all of your microphones to the mixer and all of your speakers. But as you see, the mixer box itself does not have any controls on it. All the control is done by iPad. So the mixer has a built-in Wi-Fi router, and that creates a local area network or a LAN network. And you connect your iPad or tablet to that LAN network, and then you're able to control your mixer from your iPad. And the user interface on the iPad is very similar to what you would see on a regular mixer with the knobs and everything, except it's all digital. And this really helps with cabling, right? If I go back to this setup, right? In this setup, we used a digital mixer. Now, the mixer here is actually hidden under the stage you see on the left side of the image. Um, Imagine we had to put the mixer somewhere outside on the men's side or on the ladies' side, and having 31 microphone cables coming out of there, plus all the cables for the speakers and other inputs to the mixer coming out of that. That would be a huge mess in terms of the cable management. So having a digital mixer also helps. But again, it is a bit less plug and play and does require a little bit of technical expertise to manage. But as I mentioned, mostly whether digital or analog mixer, typically all the mixers have, they have inputs for all the microphones, and every microphone input generally will have some kind of knobs underneath. And many times, I didn't even know what these knobs meant until I really studied what they meant. So I'm going to try to make it easy for all of you today. So if we go down, this is what a generic, we call this the channel strip, right? Where this is one microphone is plugged in and we have all the knobs and controls related to that one microphone under that microphone input. So at the top, of course, you have the gain, you have the microphone input there. Then you have two other inputs. These are if you're going to be plugging in a TRS cable, such as you're plugging in a keyboard or other kind of audio device, you can plug that in there. Typically on a mixer, if you have an XLR plugged in, it will automatically deactivate the TRS inputs. So it's one or the other generally. Sometimes TRS inputs are paired. You'll have a left and a right. That's why there's two holes shown here. Sometimes many of the newer mixers actually have a combo port. There'll be XLR as well as TRS can go into the same hole, and that's actually shown here in this digital mixer. You have the capability to plug in an XLR with the 3 pins, but in the middle you'll see there's a larger hole. You can plug in a 1/4 or the TRS cable directly into there. The next is something called the compressor knob. The compressor, what it does is it limits the overall volume of that channel to go beyond a certain limit. So it won't completely stop the volume at a certain point. That is something called a limiter, and that goes more into the digital mixers have that feature and more into audio editing and using advanced software. But in most mixers, we have something called this compressor, right? So let's say you put a compressor on a vocal mic, right? And sometimes you'll have somebody singing a very low line, right? Like Daya karo, kripa karo, raksha karo, bhagavan. And that line will sound very, very soft in the sound system. Nobody will be able to hear it. But then when they go to the higher lines, Deena Dayala Sai Ghanashyama Patita Pavana He Sairama, those lines will become too loud. So the compressor, if we increase it slightly, will kind of help us to level out those lines, and it'll make the sound a bit smoother. Going down beyond the compressor, we actually above the compressor is the gain knob. So imagine that this mic had a volume control on it. You can control the volume on the mic itself. And then on the mixer also you have a volume control, that fader that goes up and down, right? But of course, individual mic doesn't have that volume control. That is the gain. The gain controls how much signal am I actually taking in from this microphone into my system. The fader, which is the up and down main volume control, is for how much volume am I sending out of my system for this microphone. Again, gain is for input, how much volume am I drawing in. The fader is for how much volume am I sending out. So that the gain has to be adjusted based on the usage of the microphone. For vocalists, a person's voice is generally softer than, let's say, a dholak, right? So on dholak, of course, this is different for every sound system in every hall and every mixing console that is being used. But typically, right, relatively speaking, the gain for a vocal mic will be much higher than that of the gain for a dholak mic or a tabla mic even, right? Of course, depends on the type of mic being used as well. But that's the general relative structure of how the gain is. And then the volume is, of course, adjusted based on how the volume is being perceived by the congregation. The vocals are too soft, okay, increase the fader, decrease the fader. The problem is if the gain is too high, it may sound that the instrument or voice is clipping in the sound system. There you will hear some static if the gain is too high. If the gain is too low, then even if you push the fader up to the maximum level, then there still will not be enough volume for that channel in that mic, in the sound system. Now going beyond the gain and compressor, we have the equalizing knobs. Most mixers have 4 knobs: the high frequency, mid, a low mid, they're calling it a mid variable here, and the low. So when we think that a voice is too muddled, it's sounding a bit too muddy, that generally means that the mid frequencies are too high and the high frequencies are too low. So in that case, you would increase the high frequencies, slightly decrease the low frequencies, and the middle frequencies. But then if you feel that a voice is too tinny or there's too much feedback coming out of the sound system, I mean, feedback can come at various different frequencies, right? But most commonly happens, especially with vocal mics, towards the higher frequencies. So you would reduce the higher frequency a little bit and then balance it out, between the different knobs. It really takes a lot of practice and trial by error method to get familiar with how those knobs should be set. There is no strict setting of, okay, the high frequency has to be at 12 o'clock, the mid frequency has to be at 3 o'clock, like that. There's no Bible or guidance, canonized numbers that I can give you. It all has to be done based on how it's sounding in that hall, based on what kind of speakers are being used. For example, the same speakers and the same mics and the same mixer that I use at my center, I took them to a regional retreat last week. The mic settings were completely different in that hall because of how the sound was resounding. So, but typically we should keep this in mind. If the voice is sounding a little too tinny or too crisp, then the high frequency should be reduced. If it's sounding too muddy, then it's usually the middle frequencies should be reduced. And if the sound is too bassy, typically male voices have a lot of bass in them, right? So usually we'll cut the bass down just a little bit on male voices, because if the bass voice is too much, also it may cause feedback. And for female vocals, generally we'll compensate for the lack of bass by slightly increasing the bass, the low frequency knobs there. Going further down, we have auxiliary sends for monitors. So in concert type settings where the
சொல்லிட்டு அதுக்கப்புறம் என்ன சொன்னேன்? Yeah.
Hello, Sairam. Okay. Usually for as I mentioned in a concert setup, what would happen is that the performers are on a stage facing an audience, and they would have their own monitor setup. And sometimes they would want that in their monitor feed, they would want the singer to be louder than the singer is in the audience's speakers. So you can do a separate mix that way. Usually for bhajans, again, this can be different across all applications, but generally in my experience for bhajans, because everybody is facing the same direction, I typically do not do a different mix on the monitors. Usually we are pushing the same, we don't play with the auxiliary outputs. We push the same mix out on all the speakers. We'll adjust the master volume of the speakers based on where they're placed. Generally, in the front where the instrumentalists are sitting, they'll want their speaker to be louder. So we'll adjust it that way. But usually, because we are all facing the same direction, we try to keep the same mix across the hall. Another question we get with the sound system is effects. Effects do add a lot of flavor to our voice, especially for vocals. It's important to not overdo them, and it is also important to be aware of the setting that we are in. For example, in a closed room, where the room is fully carpeted and there are low ceilings, generally the voice will not be reverberating too much. You can add a little bit of reverb to the vocals to enhance the sound and create the auditory illusion of being in a larger hall. And so that helps bring out the feel. But if we're in a large hall already, and let's say they're marble flooring, like in Sai Kulwant Hall, for example, they never add effects because the hall is so huge, the area of the space is so big that there's already a natural reverb in that environment, so they don't generally put any reverb. Usually, though, if we're speaking in terms of Sai centers, right, generally for vocals we'll have a maybe a little bit of reverb. Harmonium also will put a little bit of reverb to give it more of a flavor and a more even sound. But percussion, we don't add any reverb. Maybe for tabla, just a little bit, so that when they're hitting that na, it gives like that nice bell sounding effect. But it's much less than the vocals. Flute, generally, we are quite generous with reverb when we are when flute is being amplified, so that the flute sound is sounds nice and airy, and it mixes well with the sound system. You can think of when we're kneading dough, right? The, for our we're talking about bhajan here, but for our bhojan experts, when you're kneading dough for chapati, right, if the dough is a little too rough, what we'll do, we'll add a little bit of oil, a little bit of water, so that the dough becomes easier to knead. Think of effects that way, right? You already have a dough that's well prepared. If it's a little too dry, we can add a little bit of effects here and there to make the sound smoother. So generally on mixers, you'll have a master control for the effects, and then channel by channel also there will be an effects control. So you will see here, it's very small, but it says FX here. That would be the knob where you control, okay, so from the master effects on this mixer, how much of effect is being added into this particular channel in the mixer. Next comes the master, right? So most mixers, as definitely the ones that are digital, but most of the analog mixers have something called a GEQ, or general EQ. This is the crux to reducing feedback in our sound systems when we're setting them up. So generally you would start with this EQ. There's various bands here that go from 25 hertz all the way to 20,000 hertz. And you would generally start with the master EQ at a flat line, and then you would slowly increase your master volume with all your mics on at an even volume, and then you will start hearing feedback. And that every bit of feedback rings at a certain frequency. So if you have a digital mixer, you will actually see it in the mixer profile where that EQ, where that feedback frequency is coming from, and then that particular line you can cut down so that that frequency is reduced, and that you are eliminating anything that comes out of that frequency. So hopefully you will not experience feedback at that particular frequency which you have reduced. So you keep doing this process, keep increasing the master volume until you don't hear any feedback to a certain point, right? At some point, if you increase the master volume all the way to plus 10, then you would have reduced the entire EQ, and your whole sound system will sound just like a muddled mess. So the goal is to not bring all the knobs down, but at a reasonable level. Maybe if your knob is at plus 3 or plus 4, your master volume, and you're not getting any feedback at that master level point, that's generally a good stopping place for doing the EQ. We can go hours and hours, on how we can do this EQ process. So like I said, in a digital mixer, it'll tell you what frequency. If you don't have a digital mixer and you just have the 5 or 7 knobs on the master side of your mixer, and you don't know which frequency the feedback is ringing at, you can download an EQ app. I think it's called Decibel X on iPhones, or you just search up EQ sound frequency detection app. It'll tell you, you can download one of these apps on your phone, and as you increase the sound, it'll tell you it'll highlight the frequency that the feedback is coming out at, just like your digital mixer would. And then like for example in this screenshot, we're getting feedback peaks at 135 and 272 hertz. So you would go on your 5 or 7 band EQ and reduce the knobs closest to those numbers. So that's blanket way of how we can eliminate feedback from our sound systems. Next component of our sound system is the speaker, right? There are two kinds of speakers: active speakers as well as passive speakers. Active speaker means the speaker is being provided, so every speaker needs some kind of power, some kind of electricity to emit sound, right? So a passive speaker that does not have an inbuilt amplifier, some power has to be supplied to that speaker from either an amplifier, or the mixer itself has a built-in amplifier. Has to be supplied to those mixers. Or you have something called an active speaker, where the mixer itself has a built-in amplifier, and that speaker, sorry, the passive active speaker, the speaker itself has a built-in amplifier, and the speaker has to be plugged in to a wall outlet to provide it with power. Then only it will emit sound once plugged into the sound system. This speaker being shown here is one of my personal favorites, a QSC K12.2. It is, I like to call it the top of the line speaker that's available on the market, and it's a really high fidelity sound that comes out of these speakers. We use these at our center here in Jersey City. As I was saying, right, we have two kinds of speakers: active speakers and passive speakers. The passive one don't have a power connection. The active one does, and that has to be connected to a wall outlet for sound to come out of there. We also have these portable PA systems that many centers have, and these are a great tool. These are generally, it's a powered mixer. The mixer has a built-in amplifier, and you can connect it with two small speakers that are provided with that portable PA system, and you can plug in your microphones and go about that way. The only limiting factor here is most of these systems will only accommodate 4 microphones, which is typically enough for a small bhajan session, right? You have a harmonium, 1 tabla mic, 1 male vocal mic, and 1 female vocal mic. So it's usually enough. The only disadvantage is if you're going to have a larger event, these kinds of systems are not expandable. So that's another advantage of using active speakers. Active speakers means they have the built-in amplifier. If you're taking your program, taking your system to a larger venue, you can always chain from speaker to speaker and just plug them in, but you can't do that with passive speakers because they have to get power from somewhere. So these are portable PA systems. Now, what is the basic components, the most basic sound setup, right? Here we have this is a mixer, right? It's a passive mixer. It has 4 inputs. You have 4 microphones here. You have 2 speakers. Let's imagine these are powered speakers. You've plugged these speakers into a wall outlet, and you have 6 XLR cables, 6 mic cables. The same cables which are used to plug to your microphone are the same cables used to connect your mixer to your speakers. So this is a perfect package right here, right? You have your mixer, you have 6 cables, 4 are reserved for your mics, 2 are reserved for your speakers, and you plug everything in and you're good to go. Another important topic when it comes to sound setup is the placement of the speakers. It is important that the speakers are at earshot level of the general populace of the singers and instrumentalists. If the speakers, generally, one of the most common mistakes is that the speakers are very high up and the sound is basically shooting over our heads. And this is very important for Sai Bhajans because we all sit on the floor for the most part. What will happen is the speakers will be placed too high on a pole. The sound will shoot over the heads of the instrumentalists and singers, and it will then directly hit the front row of people sitting in the chairs at the back of the hall, and then they will complain that the sound is too loud because they are being hit with the sound directly in their ears. But then the instrumentalists will complain that, oh, the sound is too soft because they can't really hear anything. So as you see in this picture, this is from our center. We have a pretty small venue. We have about 30 to 40 people that attend bhajans at a weekly basis. So as you see, we don't even use speaker stands in this venue because we have these tables available there. We just place the speakers on the table, and that ends up being the perfect height for us sitting on the floor, plus the people sitting at the back of the hall on chairs. So this is for a smaller venue. For a larger venue, of course, placing the speakers on stands is generally better. At in that scenario, the speakers will also be placed a bit further back from the front row of singers and instrumentalists. And so if they're placed a bit further back, that gives the sound more space to travel, and then the people sitting in the front will also be able to hear clearly. But if they're sitting up front near the speakers, and then the speakers are way high up, they won't be able to hear anything. So, like I said, not always mandatory that the speakers have to be on a stand. They can be placed, on the. They should not be too low as well, right? If we put the speaker on the floor, in front of a tabla, for example, that mic will give feedback immediately. So it should be somewhat elevated, but not too elevated. This is how we had set up sound for our retreat last week. This is just the front section of the hall. We had some speakers in the back as well, 4 additional speakers in the back. This is a sound setup for about 700 devotees in the hall. So the way we had done it is we had 2 speakers on poles. As you can see, they are pushed further back almost to the wall of the hall. And then our monitors are on these stools, which are much closer to the instrumentalists. And they are at a much lower height than the speakers on the poles. And this setup allowed us that because this hall is also pretty wide, right? So we're sitting in rows of about 8 to 10 people per row. So if we just had that one monitor speaker, it may not be enough coverage to cover the front row of 10 people sitting. So that second speaker served a dual purpose. It was high enough such that it was feeding sound to the rear rows, but also it was further back enough that it was also serving sound to the left side or the right side on the ladies' side of the congregation. Another important thing, if you're positioning speakers on their sides like this as monitors, it's always important to point the base inwards. The subwoofer of every speaker is on the bottom. So as you can see, it's really not visible, but there's like a little blue light on each of these speakers. That's the bottom of the speaker. Always advisable to face the base inwards. Otherwise, there may be a lot of feedback that comes if the base is faced the other way. Like I had brought this picture up earlier, but this is how we had done the cabling. Very clean. We tried to tuck all the cables under the carpets. One important aspect of sound system is the auxiliary audio input, wherein let's say we have Swami's discourse being played, or Swami's bhajan or darshan music, any video that's being played. Many times the biggest technical issue we have is that the audio is not being heard, the audio connection is not right, because usually we'll try to use that headphone to the old RCA cables that we used to have, the red and white ones, red, white, and yellow, and you would use a red and white to go into the mixer. Some of the modern day mixers don't even have the RCA inputs actually. So this tool that I'm showing on the screen, this is called a DI box. It's a very nice tool. It converts the headphone signal, the usual headphone that you have in your phone or in the laptop that's playing the audio. It converts that to an XLR input, which is the same as your regular microphone. So these devices come with a small aux cable, the same aux cable that you use in your car to connect your phone to your car's audio system if it has an aux input. Same concept, you can use aux cable to connect to the DI box, and from the DI box you would use your same old XLR cable to connect to the sound system. This is also very helpful if you have a small mixer with limited number of channels, right? Let's say you only have 4 channels. You have male, female vocals, harmonium, and tabla. You don't want to exhaust one whole channel just for that auxiliary audio input, especially if it's, for Swami's bhajan or Swami's discourse, right? Swami is only singing or speaking at a particular time of the session, at which time other people will not be using the microphones anyways. So what I generally do in those cases when we're limited on channels, if I'm using a mic to sing, right at the end of that bhajan, I'll mute that channel in the sound system, unplug the mic, plug it into the DI box, which is already connected to my phone or laptop, and then I'll be able to play the audio that has to be played. So this is a very good tool, and has solved a lot of our technical difficulties here in our center. As I mentioned earlier, what to buy depends on budget, but ensure to always remember to stick to good quality and durability, because at the end of the day, these are long-term investments that we are making for our Sai centers. I will quickly dash through the next few slides and just give some small recommendations on what products are good to buy. I'm also seeing some questions here. We have a question. Is it okay to take your own foam covers? Yes, definitely okay to take your own foam covers. The only difficult part of that is when the foam covers are being replaced, they will create a lot of sound in the sound system. So you have to make sure that it's done carefully, that the mic is actually muted, and then you can replace the foam covers. Briefly talk about how the sound setup should be different between speech and music. So with speech, it's much easier. Usually, don't have any effects. For bhajans, like I said, generally we're using reverb and different effects to enhance the quality of the sound. We turn off all the effects when people are speaking. That'll allow us to also increase the volume a little bit more. And usually the settings that you have used on the microphone, the equalized settings that you have used on the microphone for a singer, generally the same will apply for speaking as well. Sometimes when speaking, as I am doing right now, you may hear a lot of like pa, 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 or da, da, da sounds based on the syllables being used by the speaker. In that case, generally we'll turn down the low frequency knob a little bit, or the high, if syllables such as s, like S, create a very loud hissing sound and may lead to feedback in the system. In that case, turn down the high frequency of the sound, a high frequency knob on the mixer. Next question was, should the speakers be in front or behind the people? I think we just covered this. They should be in front. The speaker should always be front facing the audience, facing the devotees. In my experience, high up speakers have less feedback. Yes, that is true, right? If the speakers are going to be very high up, there will be less feedback. What is feedback essentially is the mic has started to pick up what is coming out of the speaker, and the mic is again feeding that sound back to the speaker, and that loop is what's causing that feedback sound. So of course, having the speakers high up is going to reduce your chances of having feedback. However, that comes at the cost of the singers and instrumentalists not being able to hear themselves at all. So it is important to have that fine balance. Like I said, we don't want to put the speakers all the way down on the floor, but we want to have them at a height where it is still audible for the singers and instrumentalists. I'll quickly end by showing, just sharing some cables and microphones and speakers that are recommended models. Again, not trying to throw a sales page. I'm not a sales representative for Guitar Center or Sweetwater. I'm just your humble scientist working in a lab, and this is something I do as a hobby and as an offering to our beloved Bhagwan. Generally for cables, I prefer to use GLS brand on Amazon. They're very good quality, and you get a very good bang for your buck out of these cables. Very durable as long as they're maintained properly, as I showed earlier. If you're looking for deals generally around Black Friday or Amazon Day, you'll find these 25-foot cables, 6-pack for less than $35. That's like $6 to $7 a cable. So it's a very good cable to use, and this is, like I said, universal. You can use it for your speakers or your mixer, for your microphones, anything. Microphones, generally, after having tested various different microphones, I think the gold standard of the vocal microphone is a Shure Beta 58A. Typically, it's at a higher cost of about $170. There's a sister microphone to that, the Shure SM58. That's about $100. The Shure Beta 58A generally runs for about $175. I have tested both side by side. Trust me, the sound difference, there's a stark difference in the sound between the two mics. If you're looking for a lower budget option, the Audio Technica M4000S is a great mic. I actually have it right here. These run for about $40 a piece, or you can generally buy three of them for $50. So if you're on a budget, these are also a great option. But I would say the gold standard is definitely the Shure Beta 58A. For harmonium, the gold standard, I would say, is a Rode NT5. This is a condenser microphone. Sorry, one thing I did not cover, very important. The two different kinds of microphones we have is condenser microphone and the dynamic microphone. Condenser microphone actually requires an electric current be supplied to the microphone from the sound system. So if you see on many mixers, you'll have this button called 48 volt. If you click that, that begins the supply of electricity to the microphones. So if you're using condenser mics, it's important that that's called phantom power, that phantom power is turned on. Digital mixers generally will allow you to turn phantom power on and off per every channel. For analog mixers, it's generally just a master on-off switch for the whole mixer. If you're using dynamic mics, it is still okay to supply phantom power to those mics. It's not going to harm the mics, but it is needed if you're using a combination of dynamics and condensers, which is usually the case when we have vocals and instruments together. So Rode NT5, these run for about $500 for the pair. Another lower cost option is the Behringer C2, which runs for about $80 for the pair. But again, there's a stark difference in the sound. Rode NT5 is supremely clearer than the Behringer C2. And of course, there are tons of microphones out there that we can experiment with. These are just models that I have worked, that I recommend after having tested dozens of different microphones for vocals, harmoniums, tablas, so on and so forth. For tabla, the gold standard, I believe, is the Shure SM81. Fun fact, this is the microphone that Pandit Zakir Hussain uses on his mics, on his tablas. Whenever he travels for concerts, he actually travels with this mic and plugs it in. It runs for about $400 to $450. However, there is a lower cost option called the Audio Technica AT 2021. That's about $80. It also works pretty well. That Audio Technica can also be used on Dholak as well as the Behringer C2s that I had showed earlier. And then just some general use mics. We have on the left is a Rode M5. This is a great mic for flute, for violin. Also the Pro 37. That's pretty much an upgraded version of the Audio Technica 2021 that I showed here, Pro 37. And then I talked about the SM58 earlier. That's a universal microphone. It's great to be used and on either vocals or instrumentalists. It's a great run-of-the-mill microphone that's really good for any kind of universal application. And then you also have the Shure Beta 57A. If you're not a fan of condensers, this is a good dynamic microphone that can be used for percussion or other instruments as well. Speakers, like I mentioned earlier, QSCs are generally at the top of the line. I would say the mid-range would be EV speakers, and then the lowest range probably here, but still very good quality. Again, all of the model numbers that I'm recommending here, even the lower quality ones, they're still of a very high quality standard. Alto is a great brand. They just came out with their TS series. I know a few centers use these. They come in various sizes as well. The Alto TS 408 is the same size as the QSC K 8.2. Those speakers are generally about yay big, and they're perfect for small format size centers where you have less than 50 to 60 people attending the bhajans every week. That ends about all the sound system aspects. We do have some additional material on if we don't have sound system, if we don't have instrumentalists. This was a question brought up last month. How can we use karaoke for Sai Bhajans? I know we're at the top of the hour, actually well beyond it. So Uncle, I leave it to you. We can maybe just send out the link for the karaoke track, or if you want me to spend another 2 minutes just discussing that. I know that was a request from last month.
That would be great if you're able to just cover in the next few minutes. We are recording these sessions and for the benefit of everybody, so that way it will be there with your your guidance there. If you don't.
Sure, definitely. I hope all of you don't mind for us going over time a little bit. I think I have addressed all the questions that have come so far on the sound system aspect, so I'll just briefly touch on this special topic, bhajan karaoke. So, Radio Sai in 2017, Sri Sathya Sai Media Center now started a project where they took few bhajans and turn them into karaoke tracks that you can actually use in your Sai centers. Um, so I have actually made this link, this bit.ly link to this page. I will actually navigate to it now and show all of you. I will, let's see, new share desktop and share computer audio so that you're all able to hear it. So, I'm sorry, just 1 second. This is giving me a little bit of difficulty. So, the link that I have created here, this goes straight to the Radio Sai page, and I will walk you through how to use these karaokes. So it goes to the Media Center's website, as you can all see here. I'm gonna zoom into it. So this is Sai Bhajan's karaoke. The Media Center has produced 7 volumes of it. Each volume has about 9 to 10 bhajans. So we have a good selection of 60 to 70 bhajans that we can use for our Sai centers. And it's pretty self-explanatory on how we can use these karaokes for bhajan sessions or situations in which we don't have any instruments. As you can see, they have provided these bhajans first with a reference track that includes one of the Radio Sai Media Center brothers singing the bhajan with the karaoke, how it should sound. Ganesha Charanam Sharanam Ganesha. And then these are the actual karaoke tracks provided here. And as you can see, they have conveniently provided them in shrutis for male voice as well as for the female voice, and a little range in between as well for those who may have a lower voice or a slightly higher voice. So this is a great resource. You can even do it from your phone, right? I can demonstrate, how I would do it so that you can all see. You would go to this website, Radio Sai Bhajan Karaoke, and you would pick any bhajan you want here, right? You can go to any of these volumes. Ideally, so how would we actually take this to the Sai Center, right? If we don't have any mics, no instruments, a very basic setup, right? Have a small Bluetooth speaker to which you can play these karaokes, and then you can sing along with the Bluetooth speaker, so that at least the karaokes, or sometimes the iPhone or regular cell phone speakers may not give enough volume for this. But if you take a small Bluetooth speaker to the center, widely available everywhere, I'm sure everybody has one sitting in their attic somewhere. You can take a Bluetooth speaker and play the karaoke track on them. For example, I'm going to take this bhajan Sai Sai Smarana Karo. I am singing it in male voice, so I'm gonna open the track here on my phone and play it out loud. Sai Sai Smarana Karo. And it leaves the chorus empty as well, so that the chorus singers can also sing along to the karaoke. And if there's limited chorus, it plays the harmonium. It on the harmonium, it plays the melody of the bhajan, so that even if there is no chorus, if you're singing alone, for example, to Swami in your altar, then you still have the feeling of some kind of accompaniment because the harmonium is playing the melody of the bhajan. So that's how you would use the karaoke tracks. It's a great tool. However, I would like to give the disclaimer at the end of the day, as I had mentioned in the last session as well, the best instrument that Swami has given us to be used for Sai Bhajans is our hands. Some of the most energizing bhajans that I have experienced have actually been during Nagar Sankirtan or during campfires, bonfires at the retreat, where we don't really have much instrumental support, but it's just the clapping of the hands and that loud singing. I can guarantee you, even if we had beautiful QSC speakers set up with the best quality microphones and everyone singing together, and you only had 10 people with the best quality sound system, 10 people, you do have tabla player, harmonium player, and you have 8 singers, maybe a flute player also in there. And the best quality sound system, everybody's been given a microphone to sing a chorus or lead into the mic. I guarantee you, a group of 100 people clapping and singing together without microphones will still be more powerful than those 10 people singing with instruments and with a sound system. So at the end of the day, we must remember that yes, we have this karaoke tool, and it's a great tool, especially for situations where we really don't have any kind of instrumentalist support, like not even a kanjira or manjira or any kind of, right before we covered the last 2 sessions, we had the Bhajan workshops. Before that, sisters Sai Rashmi and Sai Shruti, they had a wonderful workshop on manjira playing, right? So even if we don't have that, then these karaoke tracks are useful. But of course, the main instrument we have, all of us, Swami has blessed us with, is our hands. So with that, I put my hands together and offer my salutations at Bhagwan's lotus feet and offer this workshop with love, reverence, and humility at his divine lotus feet. Jai Sairam.